Hey, what's up there, YouTubers? It's me again, Brian, aka Gamer55551, and I am back with a video review. And for this video, we're going to be taking a look at this video review of the Final Fantasy VII Remake for the PlayStation 4. And if you're interested in any gameplay footage, I'll have a link down in the description down below. In 1997, Square Enix, under the name, I believe, Squaresoft, back then though, released basically Final Fantasy VII, a game that really sort of, in a way, kind of changed sort of the tide in the whole console race back then. Up to before that game came out, Nintendo was kind of like a bit of the dominant force though, especially, with the Super Nintendo. Sony did enter, I think, around, 95 and all with the PlayStation, but Final Fantasy VII really put the PlayStation brand on the map. At least that's how I see it though. It was a really interesting RPG and so forth. I played a little bit of it and all that stuff, and it was definitely fun though. Back then I wasn't exactly great at RPGs and all that, but it was still a classic under everyone's eyes and all that stuff. A lot of gamers hold Final Fantasy VII with high regards, more than, say, Final Fantasy VIII. I don't personally hate 8, but I can see why people hold 7 with lots and lots of regards. So it was kind of interesting years later, back in 2015, when it was announced that they would be remaking Final Fantasy VII. And that one went through, well, let's just say, a lot of development bumps. There were ranging from the fact that perhaps maybe they announced it too soon, to the supposedly rumors about that CyberConnect was developing the game and Square Enix wasn't happy and they had to start from scratch and all that stuff. Whatever the case was, that game went through a lot of development hell, and there was a whole issue with the fact that they decided to take the episodic approach, which doesn't exactly sit well with everyone. Well, in April though, Square Enix finally released the Final Fantasy VII Remake, or at least the first part of it, though, basically with the story taking place in Midgard and all. And while I still have while there are still some things that are not perfect, and not to mention have issues with the whole idea of taking the episodic route, though, I will say the Final Fantasy VII Remake is still a fun game, nevertheless, and I do think it's one that you should definitely have in your PS4 library. So why don't we get started with the pros and cons, and we'll start off with the first one, which is the pros. And the first one I'll talk about, excuse me, in the pros is the combat. And I would say that the combat is, to me, very enjoyable, though. In fact, I would go as far as saying that the combat definitely has a bit of a Kingdom Hearts vibe to the game, to be exact. And I certainly don't think that's a bad thing. I definitely enjoyed, Kingdom Hearts and so forth and all. Basically, the combat is that, for the most part, you're controlling Cloud and all that stuff, but at certain points in the game, you will be able, during combat, to control different characters. So, for example, Cloud has his use of his sword, Tifa basically uses hand-to-hand combat, Barret uses, the gun and all that, so you could switch between different characters, and they can also help. Basically, some character might be good with one type of enemy, another character might be good with another type of enemy, so it's always important to switch around. And of course, you have, your spells and the whole materia. I apologize for not saying the name correctly. That whole system, I always found that one to be a little bit confusing back then, and still even today. That's just me, but it is what it is. But either way, combat's fun. I like this approach. I like the action RPG approach. I know some people prefer the turn-based, but for me, I like the fact that they took the combat definitely has a Kingdom Hearts vibe to it, though. The next thing I do want to talk about is both the music and the visuals. And visually speaking, even though I'm playing this off of my base PS4, it still looks very impressive. I mean, it's amazing what Square Enix was able to do with this, especially with this game running on Unreal Engine 4. And the music definitely sounds nice. It's nice to hear a remix of some of the old songs from the classic Final Fantasy game back on the original PlayStation, so forth. So from the visuals and music-wise, it's good. And of course, last but not least, the story. And the story still holds up very well, even after all these years. Yes, there are going to be certain parts that are going to be a little bit different than what it was when the original game came out. Think of it kind of similar to the approach with the Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 remake. Yes, it is a remake of the original games, but they've switched up enough areas to make it feel like it's still a new game and all, and that's what it is with Final Fantasy VII Remake as far as the story though. It does look like it goes a little bit deeper into the whole situation with what's going on in Midgar and so forth, and I definitely don't have a problem with that. So story-wise, I definitely think story-wise it's still good. Okay, we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to get to part 2, which are the cons. So, take a quick break, and we will be right back. Okay, and we are back with part 2 of our video review of the Final Fantasy VII Remake for the PlayStation 4. So now that I gave you my pros, why don't we get started with the cons? And there are really only 3 cons I can really think of. We'll start off with the first one. Now, as I mentioned before, I did enjoy the combat in the game in the pro section though, and I told you how it had a bit of a Kingdom Hearts vibe to it, which certainly isn't necessary, which certainly is a good thing, at least in my perspective. However, it's not 100% perfect. The first one you want to talk about is the lock-on. And while the lock-on in the game works, it's not exactly 100% perfect though. I mean, there are times when you're locking onto the enemy, and sometimes, I mean, it works. You will still be able to hit the enemy majority of the time, but there are times when I felt like I wasn't even hitting the enemy at all. So for me, lock-on isn't exactly perfect. It's not broken. It doesn't make the game unplayable. It's just not 100% perfect. The next part I want to talk about, and this has to also do with the combat, is basically the spells and all that stuff. Now, during the gameplay, during Final Fantasy VII, when you're in combat though, you do basically, in order for you to activate the spells, you push basically the X button, assuming this is how it's supposed to be done. I'm hopefully I'm getting this one right though. Basically you hold down you push the X button though, and it will bring up a list of, like, you know, you get your items, spells, or you know, use one of your summons and all that stuff, depending on what the situation is. In order to select a spell, you go into spells and you pick, you know, whatever, like Matera or that you have for your character. Again, I apologize, I'm not saying them correctly. You know, like fire, ice, or anything like that, or like wind, water, or so forth. It's all fine and dandy, but I would have liked if they have taken the approach that's been used in a lot of the recent Kingdom Hearts game, where you can assign the spells to like any of the buttons, you know, like X, circle, square, triangle, or X and all. I would have liked if they had done that. That would have been very helpful. It's not like this approach is necessarily bad that they're doing. In fact, if anything, it kind of reminds me a bit of like how you activate the spells in the first Kingdom Hearts games and so forth. But it would have been nice if you could basically assign spells to like the buttons and all. And last but not least, I do want to talk about that for this game though. This game is basically, based on my time with it so far, has been more linear than, say, like maybe some of like the past Final Fantasy games, especially, you know, the last one, Final Fantasy 15, which was a bit more open world and so forth and all. And now, I don't have a problem with the game being linear or anything like that. I got nothing against that. I'm all in favor of that. Doesn't matter if a game's open world or linear or anything like that. That said, the linear approach might not be for everyone, to be exact. I mean, some people will prefer sort of the open world approach, which I'm not against, you know, like, you know, what we see in games like Skyrim and so forth. But I personally don't have a problem with the linear approach, but I can understand it may not be everyone's cup of tea. Overall, I would say Final Fantasy VII Remake is still a good game, and I still view it as a game that I think to a certain degree is a must-own for your PS4. The combat is still fun and enjoyable. I like the Kingdom Hearts vibe to it though. Visuals, the music, and the story are still good in this game though. Like I said, would have been nice if they assigned you know, the ability to assign spells to like any of the buttons on the controller and all that stuff. I understand not everyone's a fan of the linear approach. Some people may not like it, and the lock-on isn't 100% perfect and all, but I still am having fun with the game. And while I'm not a huge fan of the episodic approach that they are doing with Final Fantasy VII Remake, though, it hasn't stopped me from enjoying this game. So it's definitely one I would recommend you get for your PS4, though. I am curious to see what episode 2 is going to be like. I assume that will be on the PS5 and all that. That's what I would assume, to be exact. And if they were to take the approach similar to what they're doing with the Final Fantasy VII Remake to, say, like a game like, say, Final Fantasy VIII, I personally would be down with that. I know Final Fantasy VIII is not everyone's cup of tea and all, but I wouldn't mind if they took a somewhat similar approach to what they're doing with the Final Fantasy VII Remake with Final Fantasy VIII. The only thing I would like for them, the only thing I would ask is they in my view, ditch the episodic route. That's my one thing, though. Okay, this concludes my video review of the Final Fantasy VII Remake for the PlayStation 4. And again, these are my opinion. What are yours? What are your thoughts about the Final Fantasy VII Remake? Are you enjoying the game, to be exact? Do you think it's better than the original 1997 version? Or do you think the 1997 version still holds up even after all these years? Do you think the combat is enjoyable? Do you like the visuals, the music, the story in the game? Are there areas you think they could have improved upon, like assigning spells to buttons and all that stuff? Do you agree with their decision to go the episodic route, or do you think that was probably a bad decision to begin with, though? Do you think this game was worth the wait? Do you agree with what I said in this video? Do you disagree? Do you have a difference of opinion? As always, sound off on the comment section below. Let me know what you think, and if you like this video, I hope you hit the like button. I would appreciate it, and I hope you do subscribe to my YouTube channel. If you do, make sure you hit the bell icon for notifications of any new videos I put up. Also, feel free to share this video if you want to, and feel free to donate to my channel if you like. You could do it through PayPal Me or Patreon. Links will be in the description down below. And I will see you again next time when I do another video. Hopefully that'll be soon. Until then, from Southern California, wish you all a good day then. Bye!